Hello, Kate. Hi, Jerry.
Hello.
You've called us here, or invited us here, to show these two new pictures of how Madeleine might look like now at the age of 6, and also to watch a video, a new appeal video. But you have been recently together in Lisbon. Have you truly felt that the Portuguese public opinion is still with you?
I think obviously there's been a lot written and very negative, and it's inevitable that given how much, so much was written negative about us, that some people would have felt that we were involved. But we do feel now that legal action has been taken and that the judicial processes are saying that there's no evidence to support what's been written.
You're talking about Gonçalo Moral's book.
Yeah, but also with the publication of the file in the first place, in the initial process of the criminal file regarding Madeleine's disappearance, that there's no evidence that we were involved, and subsequently the action we've taken recently. But I think people are now prepared to continue the search for Madeleine, and that's why we're here today asking people to help us try and get this very important message.
But how can you explain that Gonçalo Moral has sold over 175,000 copies, defending that you played a key role in Madeleine's disappearance?
I mean, I think it's important to remember, Sandra, the only victim in all of this is Madeleine, and that's obviously why we're here today. Really, we're trying to reach that person who knows something, and there is somebody who knows something, not the person who's taken Madeleine, but the person on the periphery. And that might just be a colleague of the person, a neighbour, a family. This person, the abductor, has got a mother, a brother, a cousin. They're part of a family. So
do you believe that the public opinion in Portugal right now, after reading the book of Gonçalo Moral, still can support you, still can answer to that appeal?
Yeah, that's a key point why we've taken action, Sandra, and that's part of a legal process. As you know, there's already an injunction out against the book. He's banned from repeating his thesis that Madeleine is dead and that we were involved. Now, that has been two separate judges plus the original judge in the file that have said that. That's where we will do the discussing of facts. That's the correct place to discuss Gonçalo.
And you think that Gonçalo doesn't have a right to share his opinion, his conviction, under the evidence he gathered into a book? He doesn't have a freedom of expression to say that and to publish it.
There's a difference between having freedom of expression and evidence to support a theory. What the judges have said, there isn't evidence to support his theory, so he shouldn't be saying it. And that's about as much as we want to say about him. That's a legal process. We've challenged it. It's been through the judicial process, and that's the correct...
But the files were closed, and no thesis won. How can you explain that after Gonçalo Moral, Paulo Rebelo, the next investigator, also pursued this thesis? He also investigated the possibility of you both played a key role in Madeleine's
disappearance. That's the key thing, isn't it? It was investigated, the evidence was presented to the judiciary, and the judiciary concluded there was no evidence to support that thesis. That's very...
No DNA, but how do you explain the coincidence between the
DNA is only one aspect of it. There was no evidence to support our involvement in Madeleine's disappearance. That's the key thing. Madeleine is still missing. We are here as her family to continue the search. Now, I can't speak for the people who've read the book, but obviously it doesn't stand up to critical appraisal.
But this is the first time that you give us a big interview, not being arguidos since then. So now I feel free to ask you this directly. How can you explain the coincidence of the scent of the cadaver felt by British and not Portuguese dogs?
Sandra, maybe you should be asking the judiciary, because they've examined all this.
But don't you have an explanation for that?
We're Madeleine's mum and dad, and we're desperate for people to help us find Madeleine, which is why we're here today. The majority of people are inherently good, and I believe the majority of people in Portugal are inherently good people, and we're asking them if they'll help us spread this message to that person or people.
So you don't have any explanation for that?
Ask the dogs, Sandra.
Ask the dogs, no, Jerry. Now I think that I feel free to ask you. Don't you feel free to answer me?
I can tell you that we've obviously looked at evidence about cadaver dogs, and they're incredibly unreliable.
Unreliable?
Cadaver dogs, yes. That's what the evidence shows. If they're tested scientifically.
You read the files, Kate?
Yes, I have read the files.
What did shock you most? Any part of any detail that you weren't aware of? something that has really surprised you? Or you didn't find
Well, I've been through them and I've made notes and I've passed that on to our investigation team, obviously.
And you found any evidence of anything?
Well, obviously the only evidence that I want to find is who's taken Madeleine and where she is, and they're the key things. And until we actually get that bit of information, then, you know, we're always going to feel like we're a long way away. But basically what we're doing is trying to get as much information as we can and try and put the jigsaw together, so finally we've got the complete picture.
And what about your friends? Did you have a pact of silence with your friends?
Do you know judicial secrecy?
I know it, but we don't have it anymore.
You have to put it into context of the situation that we were in.
But now is the time to explain it all.
That article that was written in June was directly as a result of a journalist phoning all of us and saying, what can you tell us about it? And we were under explicit instructions that we were not to talk about the details of the case under judicial secrecy. So that's all that people did. And I don't think, you know, there should be considered a pact of silence. We were told that's what we were to do. And you wouldn't expect witnesses in other cases in any country to be going out divulging information that may be useful to the perpetrator.
Are you still friends? Do you plan another trips together, or did it damage?
No,
we're still friends. We haven't got any holidays planned, but we're still friends and we're all in touch and we still meet up and see each other.
Don't you agree that there were a lot of details that in a certain way contribute to people to doubt of you? For example, when you went to the Vatican so quickly, all the contacts that you've made. Can I ask you, Jerry, if you personally know Mr. Gordon Brown, the Prime Minister?
No, and we've never met Gordon Brown. We've spoken to him once on the phone, several weeks after Madeleine was abducted. People, I think what we've got to remember is that, and what today is about, good, ordinary people want to help find an innocent missing child. And that's what happened. Clearly there was a huge amount of media coverage and people wanted to look at ways to help. Our government wanted to assist in the investigation to find the missing child.
Are they still supporting you? Mr. Gordon Brown still talks to you directly?
We've had continued meetings with both the Home Office and also with the Foreign Office to discuss ways in which the search can continue. Obviously today is a prime example of law enforcement, a law enforcement-led initiative with CEOP, in conjunction with other law enforcement agencies, Interpol, Europol, and you know the key thing is that law enforcement believe we can get information from those who may know.
How could you explain that Clarence Mitchell left the British government, where he wore the press speaker, to be your press speaker?
Obviously when Clarence first came out to Portugal working for the government, at that time he came out and spent I think almost 2 to 3 weeks with us. I mean, he got to know us very, very well, and he felt very, very passionate about the search for Madeleine. And when the opportunity arose, you know, we asked him if he would come back and shield us from the intense media interest, and that's what Clarence has done superbly well, and he's become an extremely good friend during this.
But he must be paid.
He was paid, that's right.
And now he must be paid.
Yeah, but you know,
isn't it difficult for you to pay him?
You know, the first period, Brian Kennedy paid his salary, and then he was subsequently paid by the fund. And now, you know, he worked part-time on this and is a consultant for Freud agency. So, you know, as the media interest has dropped down, we haven't needed a full-time spokesperson to do that. He still works with us. We're working very closely with him. And he's done a brilliant job in protecting us and allowing us to have some degree of normality as a family, considering the very, very intense media interest.
And you've also hired a new communication agency back in Portugal. Why do you think you need it? And is it easy for you to afford it?
Well, again, it's the agreement is funded out of Madeleine's fund, and it was a decision that was made by the directors of the fund, because we felt, Kate and I are both directors, there are 9 directors in total, that to really make the search successful, we had to present the information to the Portuguese public, given how much had been written in a negative way about us. And obviously we want to work with someone who understands the Portuguese culture and the Portuguese media, and how we can persuade people that Madeline is still out there and still can be found. Just
Until
like
when do you think that you will afford all this? 2 lawyers in Portugal, a news agency, Clarence Mitchell. I don't know if you still have the 2 lawyers that you've hired here in London.
It's not ideal, you know, Sandra. We wouldn't have any lawyers. We wouldn't need any
Yeah,
PR if we weren't in this situation.
But don't
Nobody...
you feel strangled? Don't you feel that
we have to
someday it will finish the money?
We have to do whatever we can to find Madeline, and obviously we have to look at sort of, you know, if the fund starts to run out, then we have to try and get more money in. We can't
How
stop.
will you do it?
Well, you know, people have been extremely kind. I have to remember that the fund was set up initially because so many people offered money to try and help and wanted to help and were prepared to donate. We would love nothing better for Madeline to be found and for the remaining monies in the fund to go to helping other families of missing children both in the UK and Portugal. And that's one of the objectives. When we've found Madeline and her abductor, then the monies can be used for that. Obviously, if the money runs out, is running out, then we have to look at alternative ways of fundraising. We've done, you know, small events, community events, which have been very good for team building. We've had a small auction in Madeline's school, in the school that the twins are.
Do you still have the support of Mr. Richard Branson, J.K. Rowling, these multimillionaires that initially gave you a lot of money?
The independent investigation that's led by our team is funded completely out of Madeline's fund. I mean, an event like today, there's no specific cost for it, and this is obviously the internet. People already have subscriptions, they can do this. There's a willingness of the population to help, and I think we'll find hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people today will forward this link to their contacts in countries all over the world. That is cheap.
But you still have money in the fund?
There is money still in the fund, and it continues to be used, and we will use every single penny in that fund in the search for Madeline.